It's a brand new working week. It's Monday, and we are starting to get into the work mode all over again. Well, not for us, though, because we've always been in the work mode 365 days in a year, 24 hours a day, News Central, every anchor that's here, because that's a life we chose, okay? Being broadcasters and also journalists. Welcome to Breakfast Central on a Monday morning. A lot has happened, yes, definitely. Another attack in Niger State. Very sad. The killings, the numbers yet to be ascertained. And we also have issues from the global scene that's also trickling down to Nigeria. But then again, I can only say welcome. So let's start today.
You're welcome. Bonjour, bienvenue.
Bonjour.
And finally, the presidential handlers have revealed the location of our commander-in-chief, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu.
Where is he again?
Night, he's in, that's why I started with Bonjour. It's in France.
Oh.
Yeah, and France seems to be his favorite.
Oui.
Holiday destination. You know, the Ghanaian president and his wife, they holidayed in Central Region. They went on a safari. President Donald Trump has his resort in Florida, Mar-a-Lago, while President Bola Ahmed Tinubu likes to go to France. Henceforth, hence the reason I said bonjour and bienvenue. And it was only revealed because when he was traveling, Mr. Bayo Odonuga said he was going to Europe, and Europe is a country of over 33 countries. So we're speculating as investigative journalists.
Nobody was speculating.
I was speculating because we need facts.
Majority of the people assumed that it was going to be France.
I was speculating, scouring all the 33 countries of Europe, checking Liechtenstein, checking Malta, almost checking Guinea. Oh, okay, sorry. Then yesterday, Mr. Bayo Odonuga finally revealed in a tweet that Mr. President had lunch with his counterpart in Rwanda, Mr. Paul Kagame.
Before Gbenga comes forward to talk about like that, because it's an issue of national concern, very important issue there. Welcome to Breakfast Central, this brand new week. It's a working week for many of you. Interestingly, the roads in Lagos are very busy at this time of the morning. You would ask why? Yes, that's because people have resumed to work. Happy New Year is quickly moving. Just a reminder that you say Happy New Year 1 minute, the next minute it's already...
I mean, it was 30 December,
just a few hours ago. You know, here we are.
It's good. Let everybody go and work.
And we're all back to work. You know, just to mention that this is Breakfast Central. If this is your first time, we're streaming live on YouTube via our platform News Central TV, and we go to YouTube to get your comments. So please, we want to encourage you to be a part of the conversation as we're streaming live via News Central on YouTube. Drop a comment on any of the conversations that we'll be looking at this morning on Breakfast Central. You're very welcome to the show. You can also tweet at News Central TV on X, and you can tweet at us individually as well. But we'll get into the conversations proper before we talk about what has happened to Maduro in Venezuela, the president, or the former president, I will say, of Venezuela.
The embattled president.
The embattled. No, he's not embattled at this point. I don't even want to call it.
The battle is over.
So should we
start with president?
Honestly, the captured. Should we start with America, or do we start with the very important conversation?
I think we should start with America. I mean, it has global implications, and it has to do with the future of global South countries.
Absolutely.
I mean, if what happened in Venezuela is allowed to stand, and what has happened in Gaza, then we, as global South countries, really need to sit up and, you know, ask the question: that is there still international law, respect for international law, or is it just used for developing countries? Wow. So, I mean, what happened over the weekend? I'm sure all of you know this gist. In a dramatic escalation, early Saturday, the United States launched a large-scale military strike on Venezuela, capturing President Nicolás Maduro and his wife. U.S. President Donald Trump announced the couple was flown out to face federal charges in New York following months of U.S. pressure over alleged drug trafficking and narco-terrorism. Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva has called an emergency meeting of regional leaders, condemning the action as a breach of sovereignty, while China and other global powers criticized the move, raising questions about international law and regional stability. Analysts warn the strike could shake global energy markets in 2026, given Venezuela's untapped oil reserves estimated at 303 billion barrels, nearly a fifth of the world's total.
All right, so maybe what we can start from is, first of all, why did this capture happen of President Maduro? Why did President Trump capture President Maduro? majority of the conversations initially were because he was said to be involved in drugs, in narcotics, or we'll call it narco trafficking, right? Mm-hmm. Recently, we heard of the bombs.
With zero evidence, we must.
Well, they'll say that there were some ships heading to the U.S.
I mean, Maduro had none to do with it, and then there's no way an outboard boat it would need to refuel 80 times. If you look at the geography to get to the port of Miami or the nearest port in America. So, and they had killed over 100 people without showing evidence that they're narco terrorists. And who even said that that's extrajudicial killing? They didn't face any trial. You just go around bombing people. But that's, by the way.
So that's one. That's one of the reasons. Yeah. Now, the Venezuelans themselves have been reacting to this capture. The initial sense that we got was that there was jubilation, celebrations, as a number of them had been calling for President Trump to come into the picture. They had criticized their president of being very involved in corruption and corrupt practices. First of all, he had a 12-year term, and in this 12-year term, he decided who and who could be a part. Maria, for example, was not allowed to be a part of the last elections, where he had then said that he insisted on who could be a part of the last elections. The last elections where he emerged winner was highly contested. And it was said that the citizens in Venezuela, as well as international bodies, all came to the conclusion that that election was anything but free, fair, and credible. And as a result, it would seem that they wanted some form of foreign intervention. They said he had run the country down to the ground, to run its resources, and that Venezuelans had been seeking for refuge in America and outside the country. So yes, the initial reactions and responses we were getting was jubilation from Venezuelans. However,
jubilation from Venezuelan exiles.
Yes, a number of them who could not return back to their country.
And if you look at the streets of Caracas yesterday, for example, this number, the number of demonstrators that were calling for the return of Maduro and his release were a higher number than this. I wish we had footage. So if you watch CNN, if you watch BBC, if you watch Western News, they will be putting this wall-to-wall coverage of Venezuelans in exile celebrating. But if you ask the gentlemen, if you do, like BBC went to Caracas and they did Vox Pop.
Yeah.
And we're asking people, they said they're afraid that they don't like this, that this is kidnapping. So if you watch CNN, BBC, Western media, of course, they will show you Venezuelan exiles, the rich people, that the few of them were benefiting from the lopsided economic system before Chavez came into power. But if you look at Al Jazeera, RT, Telesur, TRT, and other Global South media houses, it's a different picture.
I mean, you speak about
it's always nice for people to, see both sides and then...
Which is why we're speaking about both sides. You've spoken about Chavez as well.
Yeah.
A number of them, too, were not very supportive of Chavez's government. He said that Maduro inherited the government from his predecessor, who he followed in his path to run the country to the ground. I mean, Venezuela's...
He further even made it more difficult than the
but
previous.
In all of this, I mean, Venezuela is rich. Nobody is mentioning the debilitating sanctions of the United States that's made the economy very difficult for ordinary Venezuelans. They're just demonizing Chavez and demonizing... I mean, if you look at the pre-Chavez years of Venezuela and Chavez years, the Chavez years have been the most prosperous years.
Economic
revival, and he took away the economic power from Western corporations and gave it to the people, and that's why the West is not happy with him, and they tried to assassinate him a few times. And then over the weekend too, the United States bombed his mausoleum, the resting place. I mean, even the dead cannot find peace. Who does that?
Well, part of the reason why the U.S., for example, would respond to the sanctions would be that Venezuela there were certain things that were, or certain steps that they had taken, for example, attacking innocent protesters, corruption,
yeah. Do you know how many innocent protesters?
And that these are some of the reasons why they leveled these sanctions against
they always like to
Maduro.
They always like to pick.
All right, so let's see what the charges against Maduro are. Narco-terrorism, conspiracy, it includes Maduro, Diosdado Cabello, and Ramon Rodriguez Chacin. We also have conspiracy to import cocaine. There's possession of machine guns and destructive devices, and then conspiracy to possess machine guns and destructive devices. Now, regardless of what these charges are, the question is whether or not the U.S. is well within its right to go to another country and enforce sanctions against this country, against their president, not just capturing the president, but his wife as well, and then swearing in his vice president. The Supreme Court has sworn in the vice president of Venezuela, who is now the acting president.
And
however,
she's been threatened by the United States that she better cooperate or she would. I mean, that's the world we live in now. We live in a world of cowboys and Indians, so to speak. I mean, it's a world where the international rule-based order has been turned on its head by the United States kidnapping. I will call it for what it is. It's a kidnapping. There's no rule under international law that permits a sovereign nation to go into another nation in the cloak of darkness to kidnap his wife and his child, regardless of what happened. The United States, they're not new to this. They did this to Manuel Noriega in 1989 in Panama. They invaded, that came as an invasion, invaded and extraordinarily extracted him to the United States. This is wrong. It's condemnable on all levels. And if we allow this to stand, then it means might is right. Because what do you mean by firearm charges? As a head of state, is it not, they saw machine guns in his house. Is it not meant to have some level of protection? Because I don't understand. And when do US laws have universal jurisdiction? And what is the evidence? In the charges, there was no charge of fentanyl or in any of that. And that's been Donald Trump's, fentanyl, they're importing fentanyl to the United States, is responsible for this. I mean, he said it himself. So there's no need to sugarcoat it. It's all about oil and its resources. He said, we're going to manage the country, we're going to take over until there's a time where we can find transition. Is that not modern day colonialism?
Maybe we should actually take a look at the video.
Well, the videos, yeah.
Yes.
So maybe let's take a look at the videos,
And then
when we come back, we'll drop in more analysis. And don't forget, you can also share your thoughts as well on social media.
Drugs by sea, they call it also. That's almost down to nothing, as you can imagine. So they continue to come in by land at a little bit less because they see something is going to happen. They don't like it. They see something, and they're right. Something very serious is going to happen. The equivalent of what's happening by sea. And we're going to Congress just to tell them what we're doing, just to keep them informed. But we have to do it for national security. We have to do it to save lives.
This is a president of action. Like, I don't understand yet how they haven't figured this out. And now, if you don't know, now you know. Because this is the way it's going to play out. And I think people need to understand that this is not a president that just talks and does letters and press conferences. And, if he says he's serious about something, he means it. And this is something that was a direct threat to the national interest of the United States, and the president addressed it.
Senator, thank you for joining us this morning. Let me just start out. Do you think it's a good thing that Maduro has been removed from office?
Look, Maduro is a horrible, horrible person. But you don't treat lawlessness with other lawlessness. And that's what's happened here. The American people this morning, George, are scratching their heads in wonderment and in fear of what the president has proposed. The United States will run Venezuela. We have learned through the years when America tries to do regime change and nation building in this way, the American people pay the price in both blood and in dollars.
You heard Secretary Rubio there. He says the United States has the authority to do what they're doing.
They do not. They do not.
Why not?
He couldn't even answer your question. There is no authority to go. They did not just do ships off the water. They went inside Venezuela, bombed civilian as well as military places, and it's a violation of the law to do what they did without getting the authorization of Congress.
So the question is, who is going to call the United States to order right now with what has happened? We'll go on a quick break. When we come back, we'll take a look at more stories, more reactions concerning this story. Stay with us. Welcome back from the break, and we are looking at the big one that took place this weekend, the big one that happened to Venezuela. The president, or you could say the former president right now, who has been in United States, you could say, is actually going to appear today on Monday. They said he's going to appear today in the court
in New York.
In New York on Monday. That's one. Secondly, there's also the United Nations talking. The United Nations Security Council will be meeting today as well. On Monday.
You can expect the U.S. to veto any resolution.
Meanwhile, on the other side, also, the Venezuelan team, that's his own team, will also be meeting today with their own Security Council. So everyone's Security Council is meeting in different parts. The question now is, what will the United Nations say? But looking at it back and forth, I think for me, since we're talking about this from Africa, by the way, a group of persons in Nigeria decided to gather themselves and decided to chook mouth, like they say.
No, it's not chook mouth.
In this
everything
situation.
that happens in the world has effects on
Yeah,
us. So they're within their rights to...
I'm just showing you, the video you see there, these are Nigerians who are calling for the entire world to come together and ensure that sanctions are being heavy given to the United States for what they've done against Venezuela. But let's take a listen. We'll be right back to talk about the implications as well for Nigeria.
People take over, all oppression, then go run away. When people take over.
Viva Venezuela! Viva! From the Venezuela Solidarity Campaign in Nigeria, a campaign platform of socialists, trade unions, civil society, youth group, workers from informal and informal sector. We bring solidarity to the people of the Venezuela working class and the Venezuela working people who are passing through aggression from the United States empire. It is no news that as we speak now, more than 50,000 United States soldiers have been deployed, and a lot of fighter jets, including warships, have been mobilized to the Caribbean Sea across Latin America. The lies from the Trump government is that they want to go and fight drugs in Venezuela. So they declare Maduro, President Maduro, and many of his cabinet members, many of the PASOK, members of the ruling party, the socialist ruling party in Venezuela, as a threat to the U.S. We all know that this is live. They did it to Gaddafi in Libya. They did it in Syria. They did it in...
Okay, so that's a footage of Nigeria here, where a little, we call it a mild protest.
but I mean, the point is, has been made, and I must commend those. It doesn't matter the size, at least if one righteous person is speaking against the ills, it's very brave. And I must, at this point, commend the nations of Ghana and South Africa for issuing statements that condemned, rightly condemned, what the United States did, the kidnapping and the murder of over 90 Venezuelans so far in that action to extract and kidnap the sitting president and his wife. It's highly condemnable. And this is South African statement, by the way. The government of the Republic of South Africa notes with grave concern the recent developments which were confirmed by the United States of America conducted a large-scale military strike against Venezuela and its leader, Nicolás Maduro, who was captured along with his wife, flown out of the country. South Africa views these actions as a manifest violation of the Charter of the United Nations, which mandates all members states to refrain from threats or use of force against territorial integrity or political independence of any state. Furthermore, the Charter does not authorize external military intervention in matters that are essentially within the domestic jurisdiction of a sovereign nation. History has repeatedly demonstrated that military invasions against sovereign states yield only instability and deepening crisis. Unlawful unilateral force of this undermines the stability of the international order and the principle of equality amongst nations. South Africa calls on the United Nations Security Council, the body mandated to maintain international peace and security, to urgently convene to address the situation. That's a statement issued by the Department of International Relations and Cooperation of the Republic of South
regardless,
Africa.
we just need to move on with another story.
Yeah.
But then
I
again,
mean, just
what we're
to also
looking
mention-
forward
okay, before you move
just
on,
to mention again very quickly that today would also be a determining factor to what goes forward, especially when the United Nations decides to meet. The question will now be, is United Nations as, I mean, in quotes, many have said it's as weak as what we have in the African Union. Are they the same? Secondly, Nigeria, how it affects us, basically, is now that President Trump and the United States have gotten a hold of the oil, which is petrodollar, the oil of Venezuela, let's not forget that in our own country, we do have a fiscal, budget.
Our budget is benchmarked
And
against,
it's benchmarked against the dollar and what we plan for. So to the United States, of course, they've gotten hold of the oil now because President Trump says they will have to continue to rule.
They will run the country,
they'll run the country until they
country,
find,
yes.
they stabilize things and then find a suitable person to put there. But the point for Nigerians, what we should worry about is the fact that dollar would eventually gain its power, its strength again. Nigeria has been able to put a benchmark on how much expectations are coming from the dollar in terms of sales of crude and, of course, of petrol. But now again, should that shift, it simply means that the current administration of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu would now have to go back to the drawing board, especially now that powers have been taken away from the CBN and then moved to the finance ministry. So there's a lot power play that's really going to affect the economy as well.
We highlight, because we live in a global village, and it's always important to point out the hypocrisy of the European Union and European states, the United Kingdom, for not condemning this. They say they are observing the situation. They need all the facts before they can make comments. The same people that on the first day of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, they were kicked out of FIFA, they were kicked out of Eurovision, they were kicked out of the Olympics, and everyone is just, writing nice statements. What this goes on to show is that the international rule-based order does not exist and that might is right. We hope the nations of the world do something about this and highly condemn it as it should.
And as we wrap up this story, in case you're wondering what the current situation is in Venezuela, the Vice President Delcy Rodriguez has been sworn in by the Supreme Court. Of course, the U.S. has been very clear about being in charge, taking over the oil there. But we must also mention, yes, that's Delcy Rodriguez. Even though there was initially, there were those who had expected, because we saw that Maria Machado had put out a statement rejoicing at the capture of Maduro. Maria Machado is a strong opposition voice who won the Nobel Prize for Peace 3 months ago and dedicated her Nobel Prize for Peace to President Trump, whom we all know has been very, he has been outspoken about his desire to win the Nobel Prize for Peace, saying that...
He's also the winner of FIFA Mickey Mouse made-up Nobel a Peace Prize. Gianni Infantino just woke up one day and decided to excite President Trump by giving him a made-up peace.
Well,
award.
President Trump will
and
argue...
look, is this what a peace president should do?
He will argue with you that he's been able to...
He had bombed Nigeria, bombed Somalia, bombed Venezuela.
He would argue with you that he's been able to put aside the happening of about, I think it was, he says. But away from that, the question is now what the current reality is. And there are civilians. The death toll has come up to 80 because the bombs that were released killed a number of Venezuelan citizens. As at the last count, reports have it that they are up to 80. And the reports from Venezuela are that citizens, though were initially excited by the capture of their president and his wife. Some citizens were excited, but now they face a bleak reality of what their future would look like. There have been massive shopping, people trying to buy and stock things in their houses because They're not sure what the future holds. Kind of reminds me of what happened during the COVID era. And it's really sad for any country to be in that situation. Our hearts go out to those who've lost loved ones. And we'll continue to follow up with the story of what's happened in Venezuela. But let's now come back home to Nigeria. Two shocking cases from Nigeria are shining a harsh light on alleged police abuse and corruption. In Delta State, for example, resident Tomi Akporo-Gene has shared how he was threatened and accused of murder by CSP Christopher Odo, a divisional police officer, all because he tried to help a man who collapsed on the road and later died in hospital. Akporo-Gene says he was acting as any good Samaritan would, yet the officer reportedly told him that he would be, quote-unquote, dealt with for acting like Jesus, even after the victim's family confirmed that the man who had died had an underlying health condition. Delta State Police spokesperson CSP Bright Edafe tweeted that CSP Odo has been sanctioned and the money allegedly collected has been refunded. Now, speaking about money allegedly collected, yes, this man was released. Eventually, he said that he had to pally up with some higher up there, like the VVIPs who helped him get out of police custody, but that he emptied his account to be able to pay for bail. So yes, that's what CSP Bright Edafe tweeted, saying that the money had been refunded, showing some accountability from the command, of course. Meanwhile, in Lagos,
I mean, this is so flippant, and
yes,
you know,
the guy has since been contacted,
yeah,
the DPO removed and sanctioned, and the money refunded.
Like it was some
we'll come back to talk about that. Let's come to Lagos.
Yeah.
A couple allegedly claimed that they were stopped or wrongfully arrested by policemen that were attached to Area H Police Command in Ugudu on the 18th of December 2025. According to the report, the man was forced to write a statement without a lawyer present while his wife was made to sit outside. Officers then demanded $2,000 via a digital wallet, returning only part of it after exposure on social media and attempting to keep the rest together. These incidents raise urgent questions about police oversight and accountability, leaving ordinary Nigerians asking, what does it take to do the right thing or simply go about your day without fear or harassment or extortion, not from criminals, but from the Nigerian police? Let's look at the post of the Delta State incident. I'm sure that we had that up earlier. But, gentlemen, it feels like we're beating a broken drum, like we're playing a broken record when we come on here to talk about police harassing Nigerian people, Nigerian citizens. And it's just an unfair reality. And what we always say here on the show is, until we start to see strong punitive measures are not what was reflected in that tweet where he said the man has been arrested.
Very dismissive.
If you can put up that tweet, that tweet was very dismissive. That is not what strong punitive measures look like.
And accountability.
Strong punitive measures mean, yes, the guy has since been contacted, the DPO removed and sanctioned, and the money refunded.
Just like
what strong accountability looks like and punitive measures will be that there's investigation, he faces he's being court-martialed, and then we see him being fired. The Nigerian police publicly says, so is no longer serving under the Nigerian police. This is to publicly. We need to start publicly naming and shaming these people.
Absolutely.
If we don't start naming and shaming them, you just discipline them, move them to another zone. It's a repetition.
I mean, if you're being a member of the police means you're responsible for law and order, and then they are held to a higher standard. Now, if a policeman for any reason extorts you, it's a higher crime because it's robbery. He has firearms, and the only reason why journalists aren't going around, why you're not hearing all the stories about journalists or people in other professions is because they don't carry firearms. It's easier for the police to do this because they carry firearms, and their victims feel their lives are threatened, and therefore it makes it kidnapping and extortion and robbery. So they should face the full wrath of the law, and the Nigerian police really has a lot to do in managing its reputation. Every other week there's one story or the other on this sort of incidences.
Okay, let's get your thoughts showing on YouTube. We're streaming live, we'll take them later. But now let's share with you what the headlines are. Interesting, juicy headlines, I must say. I will join any party if offered president or VP ticket. Kwankwaso says Fubara will bury me politically if he wins second term. Wike says in other news, over his dead body or something like that. Resident doctors resume nationwide strike January 12th. Really sad that we're coming back here again. Ijaw Group threatens to withdraw support from Governor Siminalayi Fubara over disclosure of agreement with President Tinubu. The newspaper front pages will be a key part of today's show. Join us for all these and more.